here. Okay, great. So now we're recording for posterity, and we're going to walk through this environment just based on who's attending. We're going to focus on the Mesos environment first, and then I'll hop over to another environment to show you some more troubleshooting elements. Within Explore, there's a few areas you want to know about. So let's do this. Okay. So first of all, you want to know about right here, up here is our grouping area. And this uses metadata to group your infrastructure into physical or logical groups that make sense to you. So that's element number one. Element number two are these pre-built Explore table views. These views, as I'll show you in a moment, give you kind of a quick at-a-glance table view of what's going on in your environment. And this, of course, is the Explore table itself. And there's a few things you need to know about here. All these rows are clickable. We'll show you that in a second. And these plus signs expand your hierarchy. So let's start up here again with grouping. And you see what we have right now is host and then container ID. So that means when I click on this plus over here, you see the containers that are running on this particular host. And you can see here we've got Docker containers, and we've got, I believe these are Marathon containers as well. So that's pretty straightforward, but this is really important functionality, and a lot of people don't realize what this does. So we're going to spend a little bit more time here. Let's X out that host element in this hierarchy, and now you see simply all the containers. We also have pre-built views here. So for example, we've got a kind of tight Marathon grouping, which shows Marathon groups, apps, and containers. You've got Mesos grouping, which starts at the framework and then goes down to the task and container ID. And then what we call this one, the kind of full Marathon group, Mesos framework, Marathon group, Marathon app, and Marathon task. So let's apply this grouping. Okay. So now what you see is here we've switched to a logical view. So we're no longer thinking about hosts and IP addresses, but we're thinking about Marathon, the framework. And if I expand on Marathon, you can see that I've got these various group names. And if I click on any of these groups, you can see that I've got an app running inside it and a task running inside that, all the way down to an individual container. Hopefully this makes sense so far. Let's switch over to, let's try this. Just find one that'll be good for our demo here. There we go. So this is kind of this is all Mesos focused, and again similarly this may be how you use it. Now for each of these layers in this Explore table, you're looking at an aggregation of all the relevant information. So if you had 100 containers running Redis, this line here would say Redis parenthesis 100, and this data would be an aggregation of those 100 an aggregation of those 100 containers. Robert just asked a good question. There's no Marathon full in our selection. Awesome. If this is relevant for you, it's actually a good opportunity to build it because we include a few defaults, but generally people build their own hierarchies that are interesting to them. One important thing to know about these pre-built hierarchies in the grouping area is they don't share across accounts, and that's a temporary limitation. But it does mean that a new user coming in will need to create that that pre-built grouping. So what you could do, let me show you how to do that. Is for example, we may be interested in adding another grouping here as opposed to task name. You can click on this and say Mesos, and you can see all of the features you could potentially group on for Mesos. So for example, Mesos task name. But now I'm looking for something that's Marathon oriented. So here I might want the Marathon group name. I can click on this. And then I want to add another one, Marathon app name. And then get down to the container ID. And there you go. Now we want to save it. I don't think I'm going to be able to save this because I have one with the exact same setting, but you can come down here, and if you want to save it, save. Here you go. Now it's saved. Hopefully you're able to do that along at home with me right now. I'm going to delete this one as I don't need it. Let's go back to this view. All right, so hopefully now you've got a grouping that's relevant to you. Now, this table is fully configurable. So right now we're looking at CPU, memory usage, network bytes, requests, so on and so forth. There's, you see the gear here. The gear gives you your editing capabilities. Your editing capabilities give you aggregation and how you'd like to aggregate data, as well as whether or not you'd like to enable color coding and remove the column altogether. So let's just suppose I was not interested in network bytes as an individual column. I can click remove here. Great, it's gone. Let's say instead I'm interested in adding another column. So we'll go up to the table itself and say I'd like to add a column. So I might be interested, for example, in something like capacity stolen %. And when I get out of here, oh, this is a very big table. Let's remove a couple other columns so we can see it. There's my capacity stolen % on the side. And now I may choose to enable color coding and say, change that 0.5. Nothing qualifies right now as something to be color coded, but if this were a little bit higher, it would have. So that's cool. We've got the customized. We've got a customized table that's kind of working how we'd like it to. Now the good news is, oh, great question coming in from Robert. Let's see, is the CPU column an average versus an aggregation? That's okay, got it. So let me try and clarify the language. In order to aggregate data across multiple components, you have to apply some kind of aggregation method. An average is one kind of aggregation method. Let's go in here. So what we could say is, over the period of time we're looking at, that's the time aggregation, which is right now up here, you can see 2 hours. Right now I'm taking the average. And instead I could say, well, take the maximum across an individual unit. And now, let's do that again, across the group that I'm looking at. So give me right now it's saying, give me the average across that group of items, and I could say maximum. So in this case, nothing would exceed 100%, but you may have noticed also, you could give a sum. So now it's, as opposed to saying a maximum for an individual item, let's say the sum of all items. And you'll see here, the numbers are much larger. So it's your choice how you want to look at it. What I will say is that most people don't look at sums across many units, if you will, or logical units. We see more people using either like average or maximum to look at spikes. Awesome question. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is fully customizable, but we've got a number of versions that are built here that would be incredibly useful to you. One of the most useful that I find are some of these service performance views. So you can look at these service performance views, and what these are looking at is taking the aggregation of your services and looking at container count. This looks like a summary of it. Okay. This is container count requests per second. These are requests, average time in, and then average time, request time. So this is kind of a way for you to quickly look at some of these, the services. Another one that's incredibly useful is down here, which are your container limits. And these, if you have CPU shares or quota set up in terms of how you limit or allocate resources, which you probably do, this is a great way of looking at who's potentially stealing resources, who's underutilizing their resources, or who's overutilizing their resources. And it's very helpful in terms of planning for those particular applications and components. So I highly recommend taking a look over here. Gary or Robert, are you guys operating on private cloud? Are you in Amazon? Let me know where you are. You're in Amazon. Okay, cool. So you hopefully have set up your AWS CloudWatch integration as well. If you have not, come over here to settings, and it requires you to put in your read-only credentials. But once you do that, we'll collect more information about your AWS services as well. And then this tab will also be useful for you. If I recall correctly, I'm not sure this environment is running on AWS. Let's take a look here, but we can find out quickly. If I click on any of these views, you'll see that we can also do groupings by information like cloud provider ID, cloud provider account, Amazon availability zone, so on and so forth. And so we have pre-built views for those AWS services. So highly recommend that you enable your AWS integration. Another question, Diego, welcome. Plans for Azure, running DCOS on Azure Container Service. Awesome, very good to know. We absolutely do have plans for Azure integration. So first of all, obviously, if you're running DCOS on Azure Container Service, I assume you're already using Sysdig. The base the base deployment of our agent works great. And then, we want to kind of continue to do more to run, to kind of do a similar integration with AWS, with Azure that we've done with AWS. So stay tuned for that. All right, so we've spent a bunch of time here looking at the Explore table. It's incredibly useful. It's pretty differentiated too. I mean, you don't see this kind of model of interacting with your entire infrastructure. We like to call it top for your entire infrastructure. And we spent a lot of time, Diego, I'm hoping you got, you saw us playing with this grouping bar up here. It's critical functionality. It really allows you to group your infrastructure in any way you'd like, whether it's a physical view of hosts and containers, or a more logical view that that applies to your particular infrastructure and how you've orchestrated it. Great. And Diego, if you haven't done it already, please log in to your environment so you can kind of play along at home. Cool. All right. Next step. Let's dig in. The next big thing, and you'd be surprised how many people don't realize it, is you can click on any row here, and you're going to get a deep dive into our pre-built views of this particular environment. Let's choose a Java application to start here. Click on Java, you'll see it immediately pops up a pre-built view here. Now, it defaults to overview by process, but we've actually just added some new interesting service-oriented views, and so I'm going to take you to those views. So these service-oriented views are what I consider them generic, but generic in a good way, in that they'll apply against almost all of your particular services, and that will give you an overview of what's happening in your environment. In fact, if I step up one to Marathon, let's step up to Marathon. Click on Overview by Service here. I've actually never ever done this before. Let's try it. Cool. Okay, so here what you're looking at is services, but basically by image of your container. So the way we can track, what's likely to be a service here is by the images. And in a highly generic way, this is pretty useful. So you can see request time by image, and I see my blue one, which is WordPress, looks like it's having the highest request time if that's of interest to me. Nobody's using CPU. Looks like we're maxing out on, or not maxing, but definitely stressing container limit percent by image. So this is a highly generic view. It's incredibly useful, just like your these two views. So service overview will drill down into an individual service, and service bottlenecks will drill down into what the bottlenecks for a particular service are. Since WordPress seems to be running heavy in this environment, let's do this. Let's click into WordPress and then look at the service bottlenecks. Okay, here what we can see is breakdown for request time. So local means the service we're running in right now. Next here means the next service that is requested by WordPress. So for example, WordPress is probably requesting data from a database. That would be, and maybe further down the line, that would all be represented in next here. So we could see how this time breaks down and where the processing occurs. So pretty useful stuff. Now, because we're running in DCOS and using Marathon, we can also come to these pre-built views down here, and you'll see we've got Mesos and Marathon here. So one thing you could do, for example, now these are more specific and leverage more specific Marathon and Mesos metadata. So you could click into let's see, I'm already down into a service. So let's look at, let's step back up here to Marathon, my Marathon grouping. And now scroll down here. In Marathon, we could look at all the applications within Marathon. All right, so now this is using the application metadata within Marathon. And of course, application is a piece of metadata that's standard across Marathon. So we're kind of, as long as you're using that component of DCOS, you'll be able to grab this information and see at a glance how this is performing. Now, if like you, sometimes I want to get everything out of the way and just look at this data that I've selected, you can click on the maximize component here. And that takes everything else out of the way, cleans this thing up. And now I can kind of see what I need to see. You can come into any chart here. If you hold the mouse down and select, the system will zoom in, and it will choose the kind of the highest resolution data to actually show you based on where you're moving it. All right, so let's get out of here. So we've done a couple things here. We've shown you how to click down in the Explore table. We've shown you a lot of these pre-built views that we're looking at. Let's go now into something that's more app specific. So we're going to click on this Java application. And now I want to search for JVM. And you can see we've got a pre-built view for JVM. And so this is pretty useful in that it collects heap usage, garbage collection, thread count. This is nice, it's kind of useful and will aggregate JVM data out of the box. Now this is a pre-built view. It actually doesn't represent all the data we have. You'll see here you've got views and you've got metrics. Metrics are actually every individual piece of data that we collect in the system. So you'll see here we collect out of the box 22 JVM metrics. If you need to collect more, you absolutely can customize our app check. Please look at our documentation to do that. So we could click on something here like Java heap maximum. Okay, and now you get an individual metrics view within the system. And you'll see here you've got first of all, again, the aggregation. How am I looking at this data? You have time and then group aggregation. You can choose how you want to look at it. You may want to look at a time series map. Map doesn't make sense for this, but a number would. A number is the aggregate across that time we're looking at. Go back to this time series. And how do you want to segment the data? And in this case, because we're only running one container, it's not going to be that interesting, but let me show you here. So you can see here the JVM heap max average is 879. If I segment by container ID, you'll see we get one line, but now it's going to have the container ID with it. So if I had 10 containers running this Java service that I've selected up here, then we would see 10 lines on this chart. All right, so now you've seen these pre-built views. You've seen how we get into Java applications. And by the way, I should mention too, this is also a way you could look at Jmx metrics. So we, as you may know, we collect Jmx metrics out of the box. And so you'll see here, we have a number of metrics that are coming to us via Jmx. These are mostly, in our demo environment, these are mostly metrics that are kind of associated with common open source packages. But if you're using Jmx for custom metric output, you would see them here as well. And you could search for them, you could click on them and get this kind of view. And I'll show you in a moment how you can also put those on dashboards as well. All right, let's see here. I was trying to get my chat window back. I want to stop and see if you've got any questions. So you can use the chat or the Q&A. But what we've covered so far is, oh, okay, we already have a question. Great. So just quickly, what we've covered so far, using the Explore table, drilling down into pre-built views, and kind of looking into individual metrics as well as pre-built views. Diego asks how you can create your own custom metrics. So there are two common ways that people do custom metrics that we've seen in the system. They're either using statsd or they're using Jmx. And what's interesting about the architecture of our agent is if you're doing any of those and you've got applications outputting either of those custom metrics, we'll automatically capture it without you having to recode that system so that it points to us. So obviously, I can't go into a lot of detail about creating those custom metrics here, but completely standard. But your development team should be comfortable instrumenting either via Jmx or statsd, and we'll see it here in this environment. I'm not sure if we have any statsd here. And Diego, yes, to your question, if you start using statsd and you're doing that on hosts that are instrumented with Sysdig, you will automatically start seeing those statsd metrics here. And you'll be able to use all of this grouping functionality to get to the right statsd metrics. So imagine, imagine you click on Mongo here. Again, I'm not sure if I have any statsd here. Imagine, use your imagination for a second. You've got a Mongo environment and you customized it to output certain statsd metrics. Then, when I've selected Mongo here and I search for statsd, I will see the statsd metrics associated with Mongo. So, it kind of gives you the full flexibility to see all of that data in one place. Great. So keep the questions coming. I really appreciate them. It's far more interesting to make sure that I'm answering your questions as opposed to just kind of walking through kind of the generic walkthrough here. Next steps. Let's talk about dashboarding. That should be probably the next area of interest for everybody, and then we'll get into alerts. So hopefully you're playing along in your environment. You've clicked on dashboards. Just curious here from our attendees, how many of you have created your own dashboards? Gary, Robert, Diego, let me know. Have you guys created your own dashboards? Just a few. All right, cool. It's a good start. Diego, okay, you haven't created one. All right, Diego, good news, you're going to create one. There are two ways to create dashboards. First of all, let me give you a flavor of some of the dashboards here. Let me look at my shared ones here. This is a good one actually to give you a flavor of what you can do with your dashboards over time. This is analysis of our web service environment, and so it's kind of built for kind of for you to at a glance get a complete view of what's going on with your web service. Now, again, of course, I may choose to get everything out of the way so I get a better view here. Clicking on this arrow closes the navigation window and gives me full view here. That's pretty nice. All right, so we're going to create it. We're going to create a dashboard here. This is the last thing I'm going to do in this environment. Then I'm going to go and do a different one so we can do some event correlations and some alert information as well. Two ways to create a dashboard. First of all is using our dashboard wizard. This is the fastest way, but not the most customized way to do it. So for example, what you can do here is search for a pre-built view that we have. For example, we may choose, let's see, so we know we've got, we know that we've got Mongo in this environment. Okay, so we can choose a Mongo view. And the key thing here is to set scope. And what you're doing when you're setting scope is you're choosing tags that are relevant to your environment. So for example, we may choose a marathon app name is, I could choose this. It would be a pretty obvious one to choose. I probably could choose a marathon group name. That's what the groups are. Ooh, okay. Let's try this. I don't actually know if this will work. Let's try it. Let's try this. Okay, so now we're looking in the demo WordPress, and this is the database tier. So I'm guessing it's going to work. It gives you a name, a default name. We'll just keep that. Hopefully, if I chose correctly, we will get a pre-built view of Mongo. Come on, data. I chose wrong. All right, humor me. Let's suppose I click. Let's humor me and suppose I chose the right metadata. We'd get something that looks like this. And here you can see again, we've got a number of kind of very specific metrics associated with Mongo, because we understand Mongo will automatically start pulling out relevant pieces of data for Mongo, and we can dashboard those for you. So I want to give everybody a second here to use the wizard, hopefully to better effect than I did. And let's create a dashboard for something that's in your system. And out of curiosity, I'd love for you to chat me what you're creating a dashboard about. One thing to note that, you know, as you're creating this dashboard, the scope can be anywhere. So for example, if I were running this in, Amazon, I could use something like availability zones to set my scope. So for example, cloud provider availability zone is, you know, there we go. Maybe now I'll try creating Mongo in there we go. And so, okay, that one worked better. I had better luck with this one. So now I've got a basic dashboard for Mongo in US East 1B. All right, so hopefully, you know, you had better luck than my first time around. It looked more like your second time around. But now I want to show you a couple things. First of all, how to customize your dashboard, and two, how to create one in a more workflow-oriented manner. So we've got this cool dashboard, but let's just suppose that I wanted to edit something like this, top collections by number of requests. And right now this is a bar chart. I can choose this, the three dots here, which you'll see across many of our panels, and I can choose to edit the panel. Okay, and right now it's showing as a top 10. Let's suppose instead I wanted to show it as a time series. Okay, and so it's showing the time series. This is the same metric. It's averaging it, right? So let's suppose instead I wanted to show the time aggregation to be the maximum across that time, and the group aggregation to be the maximum across that time. It's a spectacularly uninteresting metric, but we're able to apply this, and we could choose to segment this by container ID. And there we go. Now, oh, this is kind of interesting. We've got two containers running here. So that's at least somewhat interesting. So we've got a little more data there. Great, so we can do that. You can grab any of these and move them around. See, I just switched those two. And you could resize any of these. Cool. All right, so you have a little bit of a flavor that these dashboards are designed to be fully functional and very customizable. The last element that you need to know about is over here. Dashboards are more fun when they're shared with friends, so you can share your access to either have it be a private dashboard or everyone. Now, in terms of our system right now, if you share a dashboard with everyone, they have full read and edit rights to it. That's something we'll be adjusting over time, but just be aware of it. If you share it with everyone, they'll all have access to potentially change it. You just got to be careful about that. All right. Now let's do something more interesting. Let's suppose we wanted to add more panels to this particular dashboard. The way you do it in our system is you go over to Explore, and you'll see in Explore we have this pin icon, and you'll see this everywhere. This pin icon allows you to pin something to a dashboard. So for example, right now we're looking at Mongo. Let's stick with metrics, and let me just search for Mongo. Okay, I've got all these metrics that are associated with Mongo. I have once again, I don't exactly know which of these are most relevant to us right now. You probably know your system better, but hopefully you're over there and you're looking for an interesting metric, and that's relevant. And like, I'm just going to grab this one, click on it. Okay, there's nothing there. Probably will get a bunch of these with no meaningful data in it. But let's suppose this is the metric I'm interested in. Now I can click Pin to Dashboard. And here I can start typing a new dashboard name that doesn't exist or an existing dashboard. So for us, we created this one, Mongo in US East 1B, and we see this is the Mongo metrics buffer size, right? So I can click this, and I can either choose just to pin this to the dashboard or pin and directly open that dashboard. I'm going to just pin this one and then go grab another metric here. Okay, here's one, query PS. I'm going to pin that. You'll see it defaults to that dashboard I was just using. Now I'm going to click Pin and Open. It's going to take me back to the dashboard section. Great. And if I scroll to typically they appear at the bottom, and you can see here are the two new metrics that we put into place. So now, great, I'm starting to customize my my dashboard here in terms of what's interesting and relevant to me. All right. So can I get an amen from everyone if you were able to get a dashboard rolling here and customize it? Or a yes, if you're afraid of the religious nature of the word amen. I'm kidding. I'm joking, guys. Okay, good. You never really know over the webinars. You're like, oh God, are these guys taking me really seriously? Okay, awesome, cool. So we've now created some dashboards. Hopefully, you've created one you can actually use in your environment. It's time to talk alerting and alert exploration. So in order to do that, I'm going to hop out of this environment and hop into a new one. Just give me 1 second to do this. Let's get out of this. All right, now I'm going to get into another environment here. Now I've got to be totally honest with you. This is a Kubernetes environment, so hopefully we don't have any Kubernetes haters out there. I know you guys. It sounds like you're mostly on DCOS, which is awesome. We love those guys. We work with them closely. Just so happens in this environment, I've got a little bit more alert stuff running, and it'll be more interesting for us to troubleshoot that. Okay, so let's talk about alerts. By the end of the session, I really want you to have an alert in place. It could be a very basic one. It's kind of irrelevant. I just want you to have something triggering an alert. and then you'd have the experience yourself of going back and to experience that. We find that people who enjoy our product the most have alerts set up, and they use those. So let's help you do that. Few places to think about alerts. First of all, the alert tab, surprise. Actually, I should ask you a question while I'm doing this. Who here has alert set up in their environments? Please chat me a yes or a no if you've got an alert set up. Diego says not yet. And Gary and Robert say not yet as well. Okay, great. All right, so this will be a critical part for you. You know, nobody wants to be staring at dashboards all day long. They're useful when you need to troubleshoot, but alerts are critical here. So you'll see here in the alerts tab, you kind of have a roll of all your alerts, kind of the conditions, how many notifications have been fired with that alert, and whether the alert's enabled. Now, you could come here and create an alert. So you could, add an alert. I could search for an alert. So I could search for something like MySQL, and we should see all my alerts with MySQL, etc. Okay. Now, what's more interesting, however, is that you can create alerts through the same workflow that we were showing you with dashboards and exploration. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. But let's talk about what happens when an alert fires for a moment. When an alert fires, it creates an event. And so you can see here, we have a special tab for alert events. This is where, kind of individual firing of events happens. And we'll come back to this in a moment and explore that in more detail. While we're here in events, you probably also noticed this area called custom events. Custom events are how we collect related contextual information in your environment that can help you troubleshoot. So an event is actually kind of an arbitrary string. And what we do is we allow you to post these to our event API so that you can track what's going on in your environment. So by default, we collect events from Docker containers. We collect events from Kubernetes. And we collect events through our Slackbot router. And if you haven't seen that, you can search for our Slackbot router. Probably the best place to do it is in our blog, or just search for Sysdig Slackbot. And that routes all of your notifications that appear into a channel into Sysdig Cloud. So Jenkins deploying code, GitHub, kind of other systems that you may have, can all kind of flow directly into our system. So Diego, your question about collecting events from Marathon's event bus. So by default, Sysdig Cloud does not connect directly with your Marathon event bus yet. We definitely will want to do that. In the meantime, if you've got something that's pushing those events out, you could push those, if you're using Slack, you could push those to a Slack channel, or you could push them directly to our API, and we'd be happy to consume that data. Okay, so we're going to show you all of this in action. Let's go back and start by creating an alert. All right, so let's go, right now we're in a host-centric view. I want to approximate the view that we had in our previous environment here. And so you'll see that we've grouped by prod and then by our application or service name, right? Oh, awesome, Diego, that's really cool. You're using this project to post Marathon event bus events to Slack. That's great. So if you were to combine that with our Slackbot router, you would be good to go. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find that for you guys right now. I'm going to get you this URL. Here we go. This thing is pretty cool. You might want to run this. Seems like it would run in the same way. Awesome. All right. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now let's go into MySQL here. Now, let's talk about creating alerts. Just like you saw the pinned to dashboard icon everywhere, you're going to see this alert bell icon everywhere, whether you're in a dashboard, whether you're in these views, or whether you hop down into an individual panel. So instead, let's say what we want to create alert about network connections, like kind of the frequency of network connections. Okay, now you see our alert panel pop up. And the most important thing, and hopefully you're doing this along with me right now, just choose a metric, choose something to get started on, something simple, like something that'll be everywhere, like CPU or network connections, something that's very, very consistent. And what you see here is the first thing you do is you're setting up an adaptive alert. And what you're doing is you're setting up a scope using metadata. So when you set up scope using metadata, you can encompass many, many objects in an individual alert. So for example, this alert is for our prod environment, and the deployment name equivalent to the app name is MySQL. So now I'm alerting across everything in prod that's MySQL. Imagine I had 1,000 MySQL containers running. Well, you'd create one alert that's managing all of those containers. Incredibly useful. And in this case, we're isolated to the prod environment. And I'll show you how to do some segmentation in a moment. Let's start with something really basic, which is a manual condition. You can do baseline anomaly detection and host comparison. They're a little more advanced, and of course, they're a little bit more automated. Most people don't start there, so we won't spend a lot of time there. Here, you're setting a basic condition. So, the connection count, the average of the connection count total is greater than or equal to 1. For example, okay. And by the way, you can switch here to advanced mode. And in advanced mode, you can do Boolean logic to do multiple conditions. So what if there's a very simple kind of almost language that you would learn in order to do this. But basically now we're looking at the average over time of connection count and the average over time of memory used %. And so both of these conditions have to be met in order to fire an alert. I'm going to stick to a simple or a basic alert for now. Oh, by the way, in this advanced mode too, you can see every single metric you have in your system so that you can choose something to alert off of. So Robert asks if we support heuristics with metrics. I can answer that question in 2 ways, Robert. One is yes, in the sense that these are heuristic-based models. So baseline, for example, calculates an envelope around a metric, and that envelope then says, well, okay, is the metric falling within the envelope or without or outside? And then we can alert on that. Now, what we don't support right now is you creating your own heuristic. So basically, we don't have the kind of workbench or ad hoc mathematical capabilities for you to come in and create your own formula. That's something we're considering doing as we get more advanced here. The next thing I want to talk about here is segmentation. So, of course, we can segment this big group into smaller groups in order to create multiple alerts managed at once. So, for example, right now it's saying there's no segmentation, which means everything in prod and MySQL or everything in Marathon in the app name MySQL is treated as one big bucket. Instead, I could segment across, for example, cloud provider availability zone. So cloud provider availability zone. So imagine I was running in 3 or 4. Let's imagine I was running in 3 availability zones, in which case I'm essentially now setting up 3 alerts. One for prod MySQL in AZ1, another one for AZ2, and another one for AZ3. Similarly, if I was interested in MySQL across everything, not just prod, I might kill that and now say, in this case, I would do it across my namespace. So now I've created an alert that for MySQL, one alert that runs across dev and one across that alert that runs across prod. So hopefully now you've seen, this is the most important part about understanding our alerting, because now you're creating this this one manageable alert that may kind of in reality fire multiple times, right? You could get, in the event of a condition firing, you may get one alert for MySQL dev and one alert for MySQL prod, even though you've built it off one alert. Robert has a clarification on his question. He's recognizing utilization patterns based on time of day, day of month, and recognizing outliers. Fair question. Baseline does that to some extent because it is running across your historical data. But I don't know, those things vary a lot based on the conditions of your particular environment. So you should definitely try it out. And maybe trigger off those alerts separately into a different Slack channel or a different email address so you can measure how effective they are for you. So this has some of those capabilities. We write about it on our support channel as well, and you can check that out. But best thing to do with that is to compare and see if it works across the dynamic nature of your environment. Okay, the last thing you do is select a window here. So maybe I'll just say over the last 1 minute. 1 minute, by the way, is the minimum amount of time we calculate over. And then you enter some basic information here. You select maybe a severity, like this is really severe if this happens. And then you configure your notification channels. Another question to the audience, do you have notification channels configured? Please give me a yes or a no. Slack, email, PagerDuty. We've added a webhook and so on. All right, Diego's adding Slack now. Robert and Gary, how about you guys? Awesome. Okay. So we can add channel here. We can choose. You can see that you can do as many channels as you want. So, for example, this one is a Slack channel from the Kubernetes. I could add another one saying, okay, demo alert channel, whatever, right? And now those alerts will appear in that window. I'm going to hop out of this in a moment. I will hop into where you create a notification channel so you're aware of it. Last thing I want to talk about here is a Sysdig capture. Another question for the audience. How many of you are familiar with the Sysdig Linux open source troubleshooting tool? Okay, got it. Great. So you can go to sysdig.org and grab it. It's super powerful, and it's pretty deeply integrated with our commercial product as well. And this is one of the most interesting ways you can integrate. So clearly, if this alert fires, we're concerned about it, and we'd like to be able to troubleshoot it as deeply as possible. I will show you, of course, how you troubleshoot it in Sysdig Cloud, but you can also trigger a Sysdig capture. And what a Sysdig capture does is it captures a flat file with every single system call that's firing on the hosts at the time of the alert, as the relevant hosts, I should say. So you get this deep record of what you can do in this environment, and it's incredibly powerful. Every single system call, every single payload, every single process, every single connection, every single thread is captured in that information. You can store it to Sysdig Cloud or your own S3 bucket, give it a file name and a time frame. I suggest shorter is better. And I'll show you where you find those in a moment. Now I'm going to cancel out of this. Let's just assume we've created an alert. If you haven't done it yet, it sounds like Diego was in the process. Hopefully Gary and Robert are too. You can click over here on kind of your settings options and then choose notifications. And here's where you set up notification channels. Start by choosing a plus. Sign here, and you can choose any one of these. By the way, we just recently added a generic webhook capability. So you can post, you can basically post our alert to APIs and trigger ongoing behavior. So if you'd like to figure out how to, like, maybe, trigger a script based on an alert being fired, you can use our generic webhook capability to do that. All right, so now let's just say we've created those, and we've, now we have some alerts firing, so they're creating these events. And we're seeing these events. And in fact, I have this set up in Slack as well. Just curious, can you see my Slack window? Please let me know if you can see it. How about now, Robert? Let me do a new share here. Okay, got it. All right, cool. So I'm actually getting these alerts I'm getting these alerts in our Slack channel as well. So you can click on view notification. I just wanted to show you this before we go deep. So what we're seeing here is all that information we programmed into our alert. In this case, we've got low connections on the MySQL database, what the metric was, and what the scope was. And again, this is your metadata in terms of what it applied. So again, if I'd done that alert across MySQL and segmented by namespace, I may have gotten this alert for dev, and I may have gotten this alert for prod. And you can hop in and just view it, or you can just directly edit the alert. Hopping in here, you'll see it opens up a new window. It takes us to our alert events. This is really important. As you click on these alert events, you see the metric down below. So you can see that if I clicked on this one, I would get the other metric here. There's something now you can come down here, you can take a look at this metric, you can see where the alert triggered, and you have some options. So first of all, you can compare this metric to now, which is just kind of useful to see, well, is the problem still happening? So let's do that. Let's compare to now. Now what it's doing is it's now going to take you back in time to when that alert fired, and should all going well. Yeah, it gave us 2 lines. You can see here, we can see the metric back then and right now, and you can see right now we're not facing that problem. So that's useful. The other important thing is being able to explore this event. So let's go back in time. Now what this is going to do is freeze our infrastructure. And you can see up here in the time controls, which we didn't cover in too much detail yet, the time controls are now frozen back in time when this alert actually occurred, 4:16 to 5:16 p.m. on October 3rd. Here's our event correlation functionality. So you can see that here the alert was fired. And we can see we have some related events, those contextual events I was telling you about, which are here. So we can see, for example, right around the time this alert happened, there was a WordPress deploy. We were scaling a replica set. We killed off some containers. This is interesting to note. This WordPress deploy could have had something to do with this. What happened when this thing resolved itself? Interesting. We've got some deleted a pod, created a pod. Interesting. Now, we may be able to tell from this information exactly what's happened. It definitely looks like Kubernetes in this case was rolling over to a new set of containers. And we'll see here that Jenkins rolled back. So this was in a message we got from Jenkins through our Slack bot integration, which allowed us to correlate these events to what's going on with the metric. We may have also wanted to see, well, how did this impact prod? So you can see here we've got dev and prod. I'd like to look at them together. So I can click on this MySQL row, so I can see MySQL across everything and segment by any of that metadata I was looking for. And now we can see here prod was really not affected by this environment where dev was pretty impacted. Okay, we're running over a little bit here. We've covered most of the relevant stuff. I didn't get to show you the actual open source integration, but hopefully, I'm happy to take cues from you guys in terms of if there's anything else you need to see. Here's what you've seen so far. We walked through Explore in detail using the Explore table, drilling down on any row to see our pre-built views, building relevant dashboards, both from the wizard and the Explorer view, creating alerts, and exploring those alerts. That really does cover the bulk of what you're able to do with Sysdig today. But I want to stop here and see if you have follow-on questions, comments, things you were hoping I'd show you but maybe didn't get to. And I'm happy to stay on longer and address any of those if you need me to. Great. Okay. Well, feel free to type in the questions. Okay, Diego has a question, which is views and service bottlenecks. How can I dig into why processing is so high? It's a very good question. There's certainly ways you can do it. That may be a place where you are interested in using the open source tool, the CLI, as you will get much more detail. You can also look into the hosts and containers views, and you can look at an overview by process and top processes. So this could give you your initial clues as to what's going on here in terms of what's using up the processing power. And so in this case here, we're cycled in on MySQL, so not surprisingly, the MySQL D is the thing that's using the most processing power. So in any case, both these top processes and top server processes will be useful to you for starting to troubleshoot that. And if you want to get really deep into saying, well, like tell me, what are the individual commands and the queries being used, you may want to use the CLI. You can also use some of our overview query views if it is something like a database, but that's kind of very specific. Great question. While you're typing in any last questions for you, a couple things here. We do this overview every Tuesday for our customers. I think you should invite anybody else in your organization who you think might be using the tool. We'd be happy to do this with them, run through this, get them trained up so that they're powerful. In addition, if you've got a bit large team and you'd like us to do an overview for your team specifically, we'd be happy to do that as well. Just contact us at sales@Sysdig or through your rep that you worked with, and we'd be happy to schedule that kind of custom training for you. We want you to be really happy and productive. One final thing that I'm asking you to do, this one requires a little bit more effort on your part, but I would like you to hop over to your calendar today and find 20 minutes later today to fool around a little bit more with Sysdig. And in that time, I'd like you to do two things. I'd like you to create an alert and create a dashboard. And if you get that alert firing into a Slack channel or an email or whatever you use, you're going to find you're going to get much more productive with this tool very, very quickly. So if you're able to, please find 20 minutes later today just to reinforce everything we've covered today. If you have any last questions or comments, thank you so much. I would appreciate any comments. I'm always looking to make this session better and would appreciate that feedback. If not, thanks so much, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. All right, take care, everybody.